Alright guys, welcome back. Spartan Charts, we're going to be going through something a little interesting today. I know in the markets today it is Tuesday. I think the dollar is strengthening. Oil is taking a tumble, as you can see, down over 9%. I don't know where it is right now. Haven't checked in the last half an hour. And I wanted to look through one component of this sort of energy crisis, and it has to do with Germany. So here's a CNBC article. Russia is set to switch off the gas for work on a key pipeline, and Germany fears the worst. So in this article here, it is talking about temporarily shutting down Nord Stream 1. And I believe this is the natural gas. Kremlin could use planned maintenance works to turn off the taps for good. So this was Klaus Mueller, head of the German energy regulator. We cannot rule out the possibility that gas transport would not be resumed afterwards for political reasons. So it says here the EU, which receives roughly 40% of its gas via Russia pipelines, is trying to rapidly reduce its reliance on Russian hydrocarbons in response to President Vladimir Putin's month-long onslaught in Ukraine. Klaus Mueller, the head of Germany's energy regulator, told CNBC that Russia may continue to squeeze Europe's gas supplies beyond scheduled end of the maintenance works. What did it say? If supply doesn't come back after maintenance because President Putin plays games or wants to hit Europe while it hurts, then the plan to fill up gas storage by the end of the summer will probably not work. So they're trying to store natural gas, in Germany at least. Henning Gloystein, Director of Energy and Climate and Resources at Eurasia Group, told CNBC via telephone, the Nord Stream 1 pipeline is a majority-owned Russian gas company, Gazprom. Yeah, so Gazprom owns Nord Stream 1. Well, there's virtually no idea what will happen. Well, that's nice. Because communications with Gazprom have now broken down. So Europe doesn't really know what's going on here. And Gazprom is not responding. It says Russia has reduced its gas flow to Europe by about 60%. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has previously claimed Russia stands ready to supply gas to Europe, describing the situation as man-made crisis created by Europe. Well, we're going to look at that today. Let's see what the response is. Oh, look at this. German economy minister Robert Habeck has rejected this claim, saying that Russia's supply curbs are a political decision designed to unsettle the region and ramp up gas prices. Second so-called alert level measure of Europe's largest economy sees high risk of long-term gas supply shortage. Eurasia Group said Putin orchestrated a total cutoff of gas supplies beyond scheduled and maintenance works on Nord Stream 1 pipeline. Maximum economic warfare. So this is Germany setting themselves up for failure. But let's go through the rest of this here. Germany has become a hotspot for the entire EU. Germany has Europe's biggest population, biggest economy, biggest gas consumer, biggest single importer of Russian gas, and has got 9 land borders. So whatever happens in Germany spills over to the rest of Europe. Italy, EU's second biggest buyer of Russian gas, and the government said last week that lending state-owned firm Gestor dei Servizi Energy, the Italians, 4 billion euros to buy gas to boost stockpiles. And Germany, Italy, Austria, and Netherlands have also all indicated that coal-fired plants could be used to compensate for a cut in Russian gas supplies. Pipeline. So Thomas Rogers, analyst at energy consultancy ICIS, said he did not expect flows to be completely cut off and pointed out separate maintenance works that were completed on time. We do not currently see any solutions to the supposed compressor issues that have pushed the Nord Stream 1 flows down to this low level, but are not expecting a complete cessation after this work is completed. So this is essentially talking about the potential threat that could be caused by Russia cutting off gas to Germany. But I think the bigger question here is, and if you can tell by the links we have up top, the tabs, why is this such a big deal? And the reason it's such a big deal is because the European countries, as a result of agreements such as the Paris Climate Accords and all these other green policies and green politicians, have either knowingly or unknowingly shut off their own countries from a reasonable and highly efficient form of energy. And we'll look into this. And as it relates to gas, for Germany, I'm looking here at the PADD3, the Gulf Coast exports to Germany. Clearly, it's not so much. And one of the big things that we're looking at, that we've looked at in previous videos, that I've done here, is that U.S. Drilling capacity is actually increasing, right? So there is, it's hectic, but in the U.S. we are seeing an increase in drilling and so on and so forth, although it's not the same as it was under the Trump administration. It's a lot more restrictive under the Biden administration. It is still going up in capacity. A lot of companies made investments in 2020, and they're expecting to obviously roll those investments into physical infrastructure here. But one of the things that I'm looking at is the reason we may not be seeing such drawdowns in U.S. gas prices or stability is because I think there's a lot of that production in the U.S. now being exported to the European allies, trying to compensate for that shutdown, or at least the slowdown in Russian imports via pipeline. Obviously, it's way, way, way more inefficient trying to transport oil from the U.S. to Europe, because you have to do it via ship, and you can't just do it via a pipeline. U.S. is having its own problems where we shut down Keystone from Canada for some reason. We went through that in the executive order, I believe it's 13990, where they immediately shut down Keystone, the XL Canadian pipeline, because they said it wasn't advantageous to, I'm paraphrasing, it wasn't advantageous to national security, and it didn't form and it didn't mold well with the current administration's economic and whatever else policies, right? So it's, they cited climate change and all this. So you don't get gas and natural gas and oil because climate change. It's essentially what the White House was doing in 2021 when they signed that on January 20th, that executive order, or that series of orders, I guess you could say, in that one executive draft. So this is U.S. exports to Germany. I'm assuming the 2022 number has jumped up quite a bit. Obviously, it goes into 2021. It has not updated for 2022 yet. But we will probably revisit this when this data comes out at some point and take a look at where we are for 2022. But one of the things that I wanted to note when it comes to Germany is this really odd dynamic. You can see in this article here, Germany's use of nuclear power is ending soon. I think we can start, I'm not sure, I don't believe. So yeah, we can go into these two here. I think we can start here with this one, hit this one, and then look into some of the history here. It says here that Germany country. So it says in 2020, 12.6% of Germany's electricity was produced using nuclear energy from 7 nuclear power plants. Despite this, the usage of nuclear power in Germany's energy sector is expected to end by late 2022. So this was in September 1st, 2021, and they're expected Obviously, what happened today is that, or now, is that they're shutting off nuclear power completely in the country. Up until the 2000s, Germany was relying on nuclear power as a significant part of its energy production or electricity production. Safety of nuclear energy, as well as prominent politicians calling for its phase out right from the start. During the first decade of the 2000s, Germany produced a fifth and a quarter of its electricity in 17 nuclear power plants. However, the Social Democrat and Green coalition of 2001 to 2005 decided to gradually phase out nuclear energy production until 2036, following the Fukushima accident. Germany has decided to accelerate this process and phase out nuclear electricity production within a decade. Sorry, that's my coffee maker. In 2011, after the first phase of major nuclear plant closure, Germany suffered from localized shortages in electricity as well as increased energy prices. Think about what they're doing today. If you went recently, Germany just closed down their last nuclear power plant. Do you think that's not going to drive up energy prices as well? They're doing this to themselves, everybody. A recent study concluded that the first phase of nuclear exit strategy also increased CO2 emissions on the short term, right? Exactly what they wanted, correct? This is counted for an increase in mortality due to air pollution of an estimated 1,100 people. So because of climate change, we're going to kill you with climate change. I'm sorry, I'm being a little crass with that, but this is the exact opposite result from what they sold it to the people. These are the climate change people, the global warming people. The ice is melting, everything. The ice is melting, and we have climate change. So we have to shut down nuclear energy. We have to use more natural gas and oil, and we need to start burning coal again for our coal burning power plants. Right? This is the effect. I mean, and there was also, I can pull up a report where Germany's restarting their coal power plants. And just so I'm not BSing you, and you don't think I'm BSing you. Dang it. Did that just close it down, really? There you go. Well, you got to see my home screen. Yep, right here. Germany will fire up coal plants, and this was, when was this? June 19th. Germany will fire up coal plants again in an effort to save natural gas. Germany will restart coal-fired power plants in order to conserve natural gas, the country's economy minister announced on Sunday amid concerns about looming supply shortage after Russia cut gas deliveries to Europe this week. So, this is Germany destroying their own energy sector. I'm just reading through this with you guys. So it looks like one of the problems that Germany was having was that they weren't getting rid of their nuclear waste properly and was destroying German soil, topsoil, I'm assuming is what they're talking about here. So what, they're just not putting their nuclear waste in mountain bunkers? They got mountains in Germany, don't they? Just put it somewhere in a mountain, 20 miles or 10 miles or 5 miles deep, something like that. So even if they do expose themselves, they're just locked under a mountain. Isn't that what the U.S. does? We just put all that nuclear waste in a mountain? Why not? In September of 2020, a committee started examining 90 possible sites within Germany in the federal states of Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. In some of the former East German states, the process is expected to take around a decade, and the radioactive waste should be permanently disposed in the new site between 2031 and 2050. Until presently, this waste was stored in multiple temporary sites which are now running out of space. The new site which will be selected must be around bedrock of 100 meters and covered in bedrock layer of at least 300 meters. Alright, just put it in a mountain. Why aren't they doing that already? In recent years, the process of phasing out nuclear energy is highly dependent on further development of renewable energy resources. Germany is making an effort to fulfill its ambitious goal of emissions reduction while phasing out nuclear power, as well as reducing the dependency on fossil fuels, right? So, oh, look at this. Especially coal. Especially coal. Look at this. Phasing out dependency on fossil fuels, especially coal. Germany will fire coal power plants again in effort state. I mean, this is a joke, everybody. It's a joke. These people are out of their minds. Approaching the last phase of nuclear plant closure, Germany has to step up its efforts to create a surplus of electricity and assure a sufficient buffer. In order to smoothly depart from nuclear electricity production, some political actors also call for a delay in the closure of the last nuclear power plants until a certain threshold of renewables would have been achieved. This, however, seems to be unlikely. So they're not even at the point. This is what doesn't make any sense to me. Right? So let's take a look. Let's step back to the 30,000-foot view here. In the minds of these politicians and these unelected bureaucrats and these climate alarmists, and I'm calling them alarmists because this is alarming what they're doing. The ultimate goal is to phase out the ability and the capacity to use oil, natural gas, and I guess nuclear energy. In doing so, they're telling you that renewable energy will be the way forward. Okay. So, logically, if you're thinking about transitioning an entire country's energy grid from natural gas, coal, oil, and nuclear power to sunlight and wind, that's a massive infrastructure change and investment. But apparently the problem here is that they wanted to make this transition with nothing to transition to. They're not transitioning to anything. They want to, they said this here, they want to transition okay. They want to transition to renewable energy, but they don't have renewable energy to transition to. Yet, they don't have the infrastructure to transition to, and they want to make the transition anyways. So they want to phase out your energy while having nothing to be reliant on in the future, and they think, what? Because of unicorns and magic fairy dust, that energy capacity from solar and wind is going to be equivalent to what they got out of coal, oil, natural gas, and nuclear power. Right? It's completely unfathomable. This isn't reason. These people aren't insane. They're not there. Their cognition is not there if they believe that this is the way forward. I mean, it started in 2001, 2005 because of one accident in Japan. You had Ukraine. You had Chernobyl. And then decades later, because of a massive tsunami or hurricane, you had a nuclear power plant go up in Japan. And because of that, Germany shuts down their nuclear power? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. And we'll look at it right here. Look at this. And then you can see on this page here, German nuclear power in Germany. Look at, in 1970, they started building it up. And then it kind of came, I mean, look at 20,000 megawatts. What's MWE? Okay, I don't know. Well, megawatts something. Megawatts of electricity? I don't know. 20,000. Got up to 22,900. And then after 2001, 2002, 2001, dipped. And then it dipped massively between 2010 and 2011. and then dipped again, and it's just been going lower and lower, and now they're almost at zero, pretty much. This is 2022 right now. Reference unit power, megawatts E, whatever that is. So they're clearly, I mean, this is a huge reduction. What's the reduction between even here? 20,000 down to 4,000. That's a 16,000 megawatts lost, cutting off their own energy. This is why energy is a problem in Germany. This is why energy is a problem in Germany, not Russia invading Ukraine. This is a 2-decade long plan, essentially, from 2001 to 2022 to shut off the nuclear capacity in Germany. Why? And we'll look into that. So look at the history here. Why is this happening? So this is 2021 Clean Energy Wire. This is the history behind Germany's nuclear phase-out. Okay, that's annoying. Nuclear phase-out is as much part of the Energiewende, energy transition. Here it is, again, energy transition as the move towards a low-carbon economy. Despite ongoing quarrels over its cost and international perception that German angst caused the government to shut down reactor after Fukushima accident, a majority of Germans still in favor of putting an end to nuclear power. Germany wants to curb greenhouse gas emissions, but at the same time will shut down all of its nuclear power stations, which in the year 2000 had a 29.5% share of the power generation mix. In 2022, that share was down to 11.4%. And by 2022, all plants are going to be shut down. That's now. It is done. It's over. The country is pursuing the target of filling the gap with renewable energy, right? Sun and wind to replace nuclear power, apparently. The anti-nuclear movement, and we're going to go through this. I don't care how long it takes. You guys can skip forward if you'd like, and I'll post all of these in the description below so you can read them as well. But let's get a good context here. Germany has set itself a dual goal with its energy transition. Or, I'm not going to say that. The country wants to move from fossil fuel-based energy generation to a largely carbon-free energy sector while also phasing out nuclear energy by 2022. What many international observers have portrayed as a panic reaction following the Fukushima disaster in 2011 actually has a long history and is deeply rooted in German society, apparently. Anti-nuclear movements started in the 70s when local initiatives organized protests against plans to build nuclear power stations. Rallies and legal challenges against individual projects were supported locally across party lines. They had a bunch of protesters. After the accident at the U.S. nuclear power plant 3 Mile Island in 1979, 200,000 people took to the streets in Hanover and Bonn, demonstrating against the use of nuclear power. More protesters followed whenever locations for radioactive waste processing and storage were considered. The anti-nuclear movement was one of the key driving factors behind the foundation of the Green Party in the 1980. The nuclear catastrophe in Chernobyl in 1986 caused widespread fear of nuclear power and strengthened the anti-nuclear sentiment. A majority of Germans were concerned about the risk of the technology. Most politicians began to stress that nuclear was a transient technology, but not the future, which is interesting. After 1989, no new commercial nuclear stations were built. Public protests continued in the 1990s, most against transport of spent nuclear fuel elements and from waste processing facilities and prospective waste storage sites. So here's the nuclear phase out. So this article's from 2015, by the way. After the Social Democrats and the Green Party won the elections in 1998, the government of Gerhard Schröder reached what became known as the nuclear consensus. With the big utilities, they agreed to limit the lifespan of nuclear power stations to 32 years. The plan allocated each plant an amount of electricity that it could produce before it had to shut down. Because nuclear power generation can vary, the plan did not set an exact date for the complete phase-out, but in theory, the last one would have had to close in 2022. The new nuclear power plants were banned altogether. The agreement became law in 2002. Two plants were taken offline in 03 and 05. The opposition Christian Democratic Union and its chairwoman Angela Merkel objected to the agreement, calling it a destruction of national property that would be revoked if the CDU came into power. Didn't she become into power? Anyways, didn't Merkel become? Okay, maybe she got on board. This was 15, by the way, remember. When the CDU-CSU won the election in 2009 and it says right there, formed a coalition with the Free Democrats, they extended the operating time by 8 years for 7 nuclear power plants and 14 years for the remaining 10. This became known as the phase-out of nuclear phase-out. Some 40,000 people went to the streets in Berlin to protest against the decision in 2010. Fukushima, in the wake of the nuclear catastrophe in Fukushima, Japan, in 2011, sorry, I had my timetable wrong. It said 2001, 2005. That was the time for the party to take over. I forgot Fukushima was 2011. The same Merkel government decided on a 14-15 March to suspend the 2010 lifetime extension for a 3-month period and then to mothball Germany's 7 oldest reactors for the same time period. The accident in Fukushima and the reaction by Germany's federal government coincided with the hot phase of campaigning for the important election of the rich and influential state of Baden-Württemberg, where after 58 years in power, conservative CDU was under threat by the Green Party. The Green Party won and provided the state premier for the first time in Germany. In 2011, the government proposed to shut down 8 nuclear power plants for good and limit the operation of remaining 9 to 2022. Over 80% of parliamentarians voted in favor of the bill in the Bundestag. All right, and the left party only objected because it wanted a faster exit and measures inclusion in the Constitution. Polls in the following year consistent showed a majority of the population to be in favor of phasing out nuclear power in the country. Well, you know what? At this point, this is what you get. You reap what you sow. You were completely ignorant to the fact that you need energy to live. You wanted to shut it down because of some social policies, social problems. You wouldn't allow anything new to be built. You didn't know how to store it properly. Your government managed it poorly. And because of poor management, the country wanted it to be riddled. Just gone. Get rid of it. Anyways. So Germany has brought this on themselves. Germany has brought this problem into themselves. I don't feel bad for the German people. I don't feel bad for the German government. I do feel bad once they start to freeze and starve over this winter. I will feel bad once they start to freeze and they don't have power to heat their homes and they won't have food and they're essentially going to collapse themselves. But this is what you get. This is what you get when you have the climate people and the Green Party and all this social construct nonsense take over your country for decades. And it ends up with your own country shutting down your own energy production and then being wholly reliant on an adversarial power to provide you with pretty much all the energy that you have to use, that you need, and then being PO'd when that adversary inevitably becomes a hostile power. So I don't know what's going on in Europe, but clearly European leaders are more incompetent than American leaders. So we looked at this. This is the shutdown of nuclear power. We looked at because they're shutting down their own power, the U.S. is likely going to have to supply them with a heck of a lot more oil and gas. But let's quickly look at this. So if they want to shut down nuclear power, then we're going to have to look at a reason why they want to shut down nuclear power, because the reasons that they give so far are pretty lackluster. There's 3 cases, one in America in like the 70s, late 70s, one in Chernobyl in the 80s, and then Fukushima in 2011 that was caused because of a tsunami or a hurricane. But themselves, nuclear power plants, how bad for the environment are they? Genuinely. Because if they're so bad, then okay, shut them down. If they're so terribly bad, they're worse than coal. It's like burning coal, but nuclear coal, apparently. Environmental impact of nuclear energy. This was updated in 2021. When managed correctly, nuclear power plants are capable of being more environmentally friendly than other traditional energy options. Oh, well, there we go, tripped up. Nuclear energy is a mostly clean, sort of renewable energy source of electricity. One way to compare the environmental impact of various electrical generation technologies is to analyze their life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, which is the total amount of greenhouse gas output measured in grams of carbon dioxide equivalent that can be expected from deploying a generator. Life cycle analysis takes into account the full life cycle of the system, from obtaining materials through the construction process to operation to end-of-life waste management. According to the report, I'll go up to the above ones. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, released a report in 2014 covering the mitigation of climate change. Yeah. Their chapter on energy systems examines, among other things, life cycle emissions of various types of electricity generation plants, including both renewable and fossil fuels. The IPCC measures the GCO2 emission per kilowatt hour of electricity produced from the various types of power plants. According to this report, nuclear power plants have a life cycle emission between 4 and 110 CO2 kilowatts an hour. That's somewhere in the ballpark of 90% less than coal and 80% less than gas. In fact, according to the same report, nuclear energy is similar to renewable sources like solar, wind, and geothermal energy when it comes to low life cycle emissions. Nuclear emissions compared to other clean sources. What's more, nuclear energy stands up very well to other clean energy sources, not just traditional fossil fuels. In fact, nuclear energy is just about on par with the median life cycle emission for wind power, the lowest emission energy source noted in the same report. Life cycle emission: wind 11, hydropower 24, concentrated solar 27, nuclear 12, geothermal 38, solar PV 48. One of the lowest life cycle emissions. The most pressing environmental issue when it comes to nuclear power is the waste it produces, right? So we talked about this. There are few types of radioactive material produced throughout the life cycle of a nuclear power plant, most notably uranium mill tailings and used reactor fuel. These aren't handled and disposed of. If these aren't handled and disposed of carefully, they pose many human and environmental health consequences. The U.S. has an entire regulatory commission set up to regulate and oversee the safe operation of nuclear power plants. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission designs regulations governing the handling, transportation, storage, and disposal of nuclear materials. Right? Apparently, Germany doesn't have this. In order to safely, Germany just says remove all of it instead of actually being smart about it and taking care of your power plants. In order to safely dispose of spent nuclear fuel, the most dangerous type of nuclear material that comes from operating a nuclear power plant, nuclear plant operators and governments store the spent fuel in either a wet or dry storage container to prevent radiation from escaping. One example of this type of storage is dry storage cask, which is essentially a concrete and steel barrel sealed tightly around the waste. They do this and they dump it or they don't dump it. They store it underneath, miles underneath a mountain. Yeah, life cycle emissions, nuclear. It's one of the greenest. It's one of the greenest sources of energy that you could possibly find. It's better than solar. It's better than geothermal, and it's on par with wind. This is what blows my mind. Why on earth is not every single advanced, developed first world nation not building and spending 70% of their energy infrastructure resources on building nuclear, clean, safe, updated, highly technologically advanced nuclear power plants that could power their entire country with the same emission effect as wind? Then we wouldn't have to burn coal for electricity. We could use all of it from nuclear, and then we could reduce. Using nuclear power gives these climate alarmists exactly what they want: a reduction in fossil fuels and lower emissions. And here's the report, by the way. The technology-specific cost and performance parameters, Annex 3. This is from the... look, there's Germans on this. There's Germans on here. Look at this. Editor from Germany. So the Germans clearly know this. So why are they shutting it down? Because this is what happens when you have social movements try to take over politics and economics. And especially critical economic infrastructure such as energy. But you can look at the data here. Appendix 3, 2.2. Table A We don't need to go through all of this. Overnight capital expenditure, one of the lowest capital expenditures compared to hydropower. We can zoom in here so you guys can see it. Here's nuclear capital expenditure. If we're looking at the max, it's 6,400. It's less than hydropower, geothermal, biomass, and sort of in the ballpark of biomass. All right, we'll just look through the tables. I'll put this report in there, and this is the report that came out from here, or was it here? No, it was here. And then if we're looking at here, plant efficiency percentage. Oh, little freeze. Should be back in a second here. Oh, got it again. All right, plant efficiency. Min, median, and max. 33, 33, 34. Biomass, 20 to 48. Biomass, gas, 41 to 60. Coal, 33 to 48. More efficient. Capacity utilization, 7,400. It's about the same for all of these. Levelized cost of electricity, 45 to 150, 32 to 94, 72 to 260. And so let's go with this 10% WACC, low FLH. Coal, 36 to 190. Gas, 43 to 170. And the nuclear, 72 to 260. So I'm not sure what that reading is all about, but it's there. Okay, this is an interesting one. Direct emissions. Coal, 670 to 870. Gas, 350 to 490. Nuclear, 0. A little bit more on the infrastructure supply chain emissions, but it isn't 670 to 870. Methane emissions. Look at this. Look at the methane emissions. Coal, 47. Gas, 91. Hydropower, 88. Nuclear, 0. 0 methane emissions. Isn't this one of the big ones that they've always been yelling about because cow farts and meat packaging plants? So they want to increase methane emissions while shutting down nuclear power. Fire up coal plants. Methane emissions from coal are 47. This is why I'm so baffled by what's going on in Germany. I am so astonished by the level of incompetency. I read this morning. I came across it. I started doing this research when I got up this morning because I was watching a Rebel Capitalist video who was using this same exact CNBC article. And he was in a live stream. And he was going through it, and he didn't do a whole super deep analysis of it. He didn't have all of these up. He was just kind of going through that CNBC report and kind of going off of what he had in his memory, saying this is wild. But when you really look into this data and you look at the cost of these energy productive capacity, these energy resources, and you look at it in the whole picture, this doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense at all. Because if you think about it in the context of who is advocating for what, you have the Green Party and these climate people. I don't know where they're getting their information from, but it seems like it's coming out of a magic fairy textbook, because they are out protesting and being activists for climate activism and climate this and climate that. And at the end of the day, apparently none of these people are looking at the data. They're not looking at the information that has to do with what they're advocating. They're advocating for a reduction in fossil fuels. But the thing is, they're trying to reduce fossil fuels and use of fossil fuels. And you want to know what I think it really is at the end of the day? The reason why they're shutting down nuclear power plants is because it has the word nuclear in it. And people don't like that word because it's a scary word, because it's the same word that they use for nuclear bomb. I honestly believe that a big component to the reason that they don't want nuclear power plants because there's a word nuclear in there. I swear it has to be at that level of incompetency or ignorance, because none of this makes sense. We're looking at the data itself. We're looking at the empirical data on the energy resources and energy sources that these people are apparently trying to cut themselves off from because of what? they want to produce more methane? Is that it? I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. I'm trying to look at the rest of the data here if there's anything else. Then they go into vehicles and different vehicle emissions, aviation, road. Obviously, you can see that here. Maritime, road, rail, freight, maritime, aviation. Another one there. Looking here. Chemicals. Iron and steel. Okay, they might be going off of the energy production. So we're getting into 5.2. Baseline emission intensities. Wastewater. Yeah. And the last link I had here was, so this is from the EPA, and it kind of has to do with this IPCC report. But it essentially just reiterates what we got from this article, the energysage.com, but this is the EPA, and they're sort of reiterating, radioactive waste, but you can put them in these sort of things. This is the dry cask storage spent fuel. Enriched uranium, low level of radioactive waste. They obviously don't have a lot of data. Protects you. I don't want to know that. I want the standards. This is the Radiation Overview of Clean Air Act, Nuclear Power Plant Emergencies, fact sheet. Maybe we can open that. Nuclear energy sources. Maybe that would be interesting. Energy kids. That's weird. Nuclear explained. The state radiation protection programs. So this is from what? All right, I don't know what that is. Let's see what's being hid by this FEMA 404. Let's try to find what they're trying to hide here. Well, actually, let's look at the 2021 saves. What's going on here? Okay, what about here? There it is. Why would they remove this? Oh yeah, by the way, for anybody who is saying, oh, look at all that smoke coming out of the top of the nuclear power plant. It's water. I'll read this for you. Nuclear power plants use the heat generated from nuclear fission in a contained environment to convert water to steam, which powers generators, produce electricity. Nuclear power plants operate in most states in the country beyond 20% of the nation's power. So this is about nuclear power plant emergencies. Why would they remove this? That's interesting. They 404 that page? That's odd. And it's right here too, isn't it? February 9th. Odd. But this was shut down in because we looked at that 2021 link too and it was gone then. And not in 2017 apparently. Huh. Oh, look at that. Radiation from coal and oil. Funny. So, yeah, I just wanted to go through this. I'll link all these in the description below, but I really want people to think about what's happening here. Germany deliberately shut down their own energy, which is one of the cleanest forms of energy that exist. The nuclear energy is the best energy source we have on this planet. The ratio between how clean it is on an emissions basis to how efficient it is on producing electricity is unmatched. Yet, for some reason, the Germans want to shut it down because they want to starve themselves. They want to have no heat for the winter. They want to freeze to death. They want their farms to go under. They want their businesses to go under. They want to collapse their own society, right? This is exactly what Germany wants to do, and this is what they're doing because they're wholly apart. And this comes all the way back, ladies and gentlemen, to the climate agenda. All of this stems from these, I don't know how else to say it, these insane individuals who believe that this planet is going to end up looking like Mercury in 10 years if we don't stop using energy. I've seen that argument a lot. Whereas, if we keep doing this, we're going to end up like Mercury. Mercury was once a planet like ours. Maybe at some point there might have been a civilization and plants and trees and all these things there. And despite it being, millions of miles closer to the sun than we are? It's an illogical and irrational argument to make. Okay, if this is such a problem for everybody, then why don't we just use nuclear power? Let's ramp up nuclear power around the world in advanced first world nations. Let's bring up nuclear energy capacity around the entire United States to 80%. Everybody can use nuclear energy. The utilization of oil and gas will go down. And maybe this is it. Maybe the oil and gas industry has just been leveraging their political influence over our governments for so long and they don't want nuclear energy and nuclear power. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's political interests and private interests in the political party. And this is government. This is government doing all of this. Germany's government destroyed their nuclear power capacity in favor of coal. So these climatists want to reduce CO2 emissions by shutting down the energy source that has the same CO2 emissions as windmills, and instead replace that with coal, which has one of the worst, coal and biomass, the worst CO2 emissions, and it emits methane into the atmosphere. This is oh my goodness, this is ridiculous. And please, someone comment if I have made a mistake here, and if nuclear power plant and all of this. The white smoke coming out of these nuclear stacks is not water and is just massive amounts of methane and CO2 and your radiation uranium particles flowing out. I mean, it's insanity, ladies and gentlemen. It is complete and total utter insanity what's happening, especially in Germany and Europe today. And then the Europeans B&M about why America is, we're doing all this energy stuff. Why are you drilling so much? And these people, I don't know what's going on in Europe. But from all my experiences with Europeans, I've been to Europe many times. I spent a lot of time with Europeans, and they seem to have this sort of, this sort of odd, sort of holier than thou approach to America. I don't get it, but I get that sense a lot, and especially from Canadians too. This is ridiculous. Canadians, everybody around this planet, from what I've seen, or not around the planet, but from Europe and Canada, from my experiences, they've kind of turned their nose. They've had this holier than thou approach to America being this crazy place of thing. And I'm looking at this sort of thing in a place like Germany. I'm going, where on earth do you get the idea that you can have a holier than thou approach to a country that is clearly not destroying, well, to the same extent, their own civilization as you guys are. Maybe that's it. Maybe this is the Marxist-Leninist approach coming back to bite, free market capitalism in the caboose, and it's turning people against their own cognition and their own rational, logical processes. I don't know. That's going into a whole metaphysical approach and transcendental arguments and whatever else we're going to get into on that side. But we're not going to do that today. We're just going to criticize Germany for being run by complete and utter negligence. And it's either maliciousness or negligence. There is no way these people don't understand what's going on here. If I can figure it out in the time span of 2 hours on a Tuesday morning with a cup of coffee and, being on my phone on Twitter, if I can figure this stuff out in hours and these people couldn't figure it out in 20 years, you really want to believe that? Where they have entire governments that couldn't figure out something that a college student figured out in 2 hours? Just looking at basic Google searches? Not Google search, I don't use Google, but DuckDuckGo searches? Right. So this is where we are today. All right, ladies and gentlemen, 50 minutes. If you're around this long, thank you. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you take this information, and next time you have a conversation with one of these, climatists, and they're, being an emin about some, oil and gas and everything else and yada, 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 ask them about nuclear energy. Get this data, understand it, read it, know it. Ask these people about nuclear energy. And watch as their shift and their understanding of the world gets crumpled into a withering nothing, as the reality that they actually don't understand what they're talking about, slaps them in the face like a tortilla. All right, guys, I appreciate it. Drop a rumble, drop a comment, drop a share if you want to share this information. It would help me out. Not for any reason other than just getting more people to see this information. I want people to see the reality of what's going on so they can make informed political decisions once they get back into the reality of political life. You can't, if I don't know, I think Germany's done. I think the Germans have done this to themselves for decades, and they're going to reap the whirlwind of what they've sown. Hopefully in this country we're not as foolish as the Germans were. And there is a funny clip from like 2016, 2017 of Trump making fun of the Germans, saying, you guys are going to regret what you're doing. Because he saw this, he knew it. He knew what was going on. He knew this data. His administration knew this data. They understood it, and they warned the Germans. And the Germans scoffed, and they took that holier-than-thou approach. As I just mentioned, this happens a lot with Europeans, so they take that to the Americans. They go, you're just this dumb American. Apparently, sure, they can believe that all they want once they're freezing next winter in 2022 and 2023. The fact that a first world civilization is freezing in the winter because, holier than thou. All right, guys, appreciate it. We will see you all in the next one.